So if you've been around, my priority here is to help you achieve your goals. That's the focus of everything that I do and say on the internet. I want you to achieve your goals. But sometimes that comes with a little bit of tough love. It is February, right? The month of love. And sometimes that means that I need to tell you which goals to take off your list. And I know we're only 1 month into the year, but you may already be struggling with some goals. And I did a video maybe like a year ago on when to quit goals. And that goal is definitely awesome. And you can reference that video as well. But in this on the live today, I'm going to share with you 3 goals that you're never going to achieve. 3 goals that you're never going to cross the finish line on. And I don't mean that to sound so, when I say that, it sounds so harsh. It's more of like a realist check. It is so easy at the beginning of the year to get caught up in the motivation and the daydreaming and the big eyes, right? The eyes are bigger than your plate. The goal equivalent of that, right? Your heart, your eyes are bigger than the year actually is. So I want you to take this with what you need. Like, take what you need from this. If you hear what I say and you're like, no, that doesn't apply to me, great, awesome. If you went through my workshop or you've been a part of the community, you're probably good. Like, there are probably no goals here that you cannot achieve. And as I literally say that, I'm like, remember when I made a mug that said every goal is achievable on the right timeline? I still believe that. So these are goals that you're not going to achieve in the timeline. That's what I'm trying to get across. So number 1 is the goal's too big. It's too big. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you can't ever cross that timeline. You can't ever cross that finish line. But if it is too big, you're never going to start. That's it. If it is too big, you are going to always feel overwhelmed to even get started. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about big goals and how there's nothing wrong with having these big long-term vision dream goals. But the truth is that life changes and things are always evolving. You're changing as a person. The world is changing. And that means that your goals are probably going to change. And so if they are too big, you're never going to actually cross that finish line because something about it is going to change before you get there. So what I would rather you do, sorry, didn't mean to click that off, is make it smaller. Make that goal something that you could actually foresee yourself crossing the finish line. Something that you can say, I did that. It doesn't necessarily mean that the goal has to be like the most specific thing that you've ever set, but which I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit to one of the later ones. But it needs to be something that, given the information you know now, it is a reasonable goal that you could cross the finish line on in a reasonable amount of time before something could drastically change. What I don't want to happen is for you to set these big vision type dream, huge goals, and then be like, well, they're so far away. I still have so much time that then you never actually start to make progress on them because you know that finish line is so far away. You've got to focus on the shorter finish lines. The example I always give when we're talking about this is the time that my dad completed a half Ironman, which anybody who has done any kind of triathlon, like, all the praise to you, because transitioning between all those different things is like part of the complication of the whole situation, right? Going from something that you're swimming into something that you're biking into something that you're running in is impressive in and of itself. And my dad completed his in 6 hours and 15 minutes. I truthfully have no idea if that is good, bad, whatever. This was my senior year of college and it was in Austin. And so I attended with my stepmom to said half Ironman. And if all we did, now don't get me wrong, was completing the whole thing my dad's goal? Yes, 100%. It absolutely was. But it doesn't mean that there weren't many goals that he was achieving along the way in that moment, right? He didn't just wake up and start training in all of those levels. First off, he trained individually right? So let me get to swimming at this amount. Let me get to biking at this amount. Let me get to running at this amount. Those were all individual goals that he set. And then it was increasing his way up to that. When he first started training, the only one of those things that he had done regularly was running. So that one didn't take as much of an up. And then when it came to actually completing it, we celebrated along the way. It wasn't like my stepmom and I just showed up and said, goodbye, have fun, like off you go, and then met him at the finish line. We checked in with him multiple times throughout the 6 hours and 15 minutes. We moved ourselves to different places so we could cheer him on. It doesn't mean that he couldn't achieve that big giant goal, but he had to break it down into smaller steps, and then he had to celebrate those little small steps along the way. So that is, it is just something I want you to keep in mind when you are picking your goals, because it is just a mindset struggle. When we set goals that are too big, we don't even want to try. Colleen, maybe a goal that is too big should be included in a vision board. Absolutely. That's a great option. As long as you are still setting a smaller goal that gets you towards that. So in the video a couple weeks ago, when we talked about big goals, what I encourage you to do, the action I encourage you to take was to ask yourself, what can I do right now in this time period, whether that time period was a month, a quarter, a year, to get yourself closer to that big goal? As long as you're setting those and not just saying like, oh, well, someday I'm going to buy a house and let me just put that on my vision board and then like call it a day. Unless you are setting smaller goals that can get you to that bigger goal, having it on your vision board is just going to overwhelm you and make it like you don't even feel like you want to achieve it. Okay, let's move on to the second goal that you're never going to achieve. And that is goals that matter to someone else. We also talked about this on the call last night. How many of you, myself included, have ever put a goal on your list because you felt like you should? Or you put a goal on your list because you saw somebody else doing it and it looked cool. Or you put a goal on your list because somebody in your family said that it was a good idea for that goal to be on your list. Or you put a goal on your list because it was a dream that a past version of you had, right? That someone else could be a prior version of you. When we put goals on our list because they matter to somebody else and not to ourselves, we're never going to achieve those, ever. Even if there is some version of ourselves or of that goal that we do want to achieve, we're never actually going to achieve that. And y'all know, I've talked about this again and again. You've got to know why that goal is important to you. And that why has to actually mean something to you. That doesn't mean that it has to be the most profound why that you've ever had. It doesn't mean that it has to be the most like deep philosophical why. It could be a very superficial reason, but it has to be a why that you want, not a why that somebody else wants for you. The way this came up last night, and this just, again, I think I said this last week, the topics for these lives are planned out for the whole quarter. And the outlines, I do I'm trying this month. I did them all a month in advance. So all the outlines for the February lives are all done. So the outline for this call was already done for this live was already done when somebody submitted a question for last night's coaching call it was about setting a reading goal because I feel like I should, because they didn't use the word should. The question was like, I set a reading goal because everybody else did, but I don't know if I actually want to have a reading goal. And that is a great example of setting a goal that matters to other people. And so then members started sharing the why behind their reading goals. And for some people, I want to be in fantasy fiction land to get out of my technical brain that I had on at work all day. For another person, it was, I want to prioritize reading because I always prioritize the to-do list in the household. And by setting a reading goal, I will prioritize the self-care act of reading. For me, it was by having a reading goal, it encourages me to do that versus scrolling or binge watching Netflix. None of those reasons were because everybody else is setting a reading goal. Make sure that the reason you have set a goal is something that matters to you, not because you feel like you should, or because someone else said that you needed to, or because everybody else is setting a reading goal. Oh my gosh. I was late, so I had to go back to the beginning and 2 speed to play catch up. just this is not related to the topic, but I didn't realize that when you, like, for those of you, if you join late and you're watching from the beginning, when you comment, it still pops up in like real time, but you could be on like 10 minutes from before, right? Because like I see a comment from 12:12 that was somebody's win. And so my guess is that they started watching it at 12:12 and they were sharing their win then. Anyways, not related. Summary, have a why for your goal. Okay, the last one. Your goal is too vague. Now, before you come at me, I've talked about this before. I don't think you need a SMART goal. I think SMART goals are overrated, and I don't think every goal needs to be super concrete. But what I do think goals need to be are clear to you. And they need to be clear about what it is that you want out of that goal. And that comes from getting really descriptive about what the goal means to you. It doesn't have to, descriptive doesn't mean specific, right? You don't have to. So, for example, I'm literally looking at my quarterly goals, right? And I have one of my quarterly goals is consistent morning routine. What I meant by that was I wanted my morning routine to be consistent. I could have just written, do my morning routine, but that doesn't clarify what it is that I want about it. Now, I could have gotten really specific and said, I want to do my morning routine 80% of the time. And that would have been a more concrete goal. But that also, for my brain, could have set me up for failure. Because then if I fell short of that, then I'd be like, well, forget it. I'm not going to hit 80. I'm not even going to try. Whereas when I look at it and I see consistent, I'm like, that was what was important to me, is that I was consistent with that morning routine. Now, if I was describing a new goal, I might pick a different word. There might be a different word that inspires me to achieve what it is that I actually want. And it's a balance, right? It's a teeter-totter that we're balancing between getting clear about what we want, but not getting so specific that we get down on ourselves if we get behind, or which we talked about behind last week, but we don't get down on ourselves if it's something that we don't think we can realistically achieve on that timeline. So figuring out what the goal means to you is key. Like, you've got to do this before you can start taking action. The other reason that this is really important is otherwise you're going to take action that's not actually going to get you across the finish line. You're going to take action that's going to go down what feels like the same path, right? Like, I want you to imagine, like, this is the morning routine round, right? Anybody who has a morning routine related goal, we're all kind of going in the same direction. But in reality, there's a bunch of little tiny paths off of it. One person wants their morning routine to feel calm before they go to a chaos day at work. One person wants their morning routine to be their me time before the rest of their family wakes up. One person wants their morning routine to be the progress that they make on their goals because there's no other time in the day. Everybody who wants to work on a morning routine has a slightly different path that they want to go down. And if you don't get clear on which little individual path is the one for you, you're going to start taking actions that might seem like they're going in the right direction, but in reality, you're going down the wrong path. And then that's why you're never going to achieve it, because you're picking action steps that don't matter to you. So let me give you an example. There was I'm going on the same morning routine example. There was somebody I worked with one-on-one who said, I want my morning routine. She's the person who said, I want my morning routine to be calm and relaxing before I get to work, because work is chaos. And I know that I'm going to be like shoulders tensed when I get to work. And so I want my morning to be calm and relaxing. And so we started off by brainstorming what are all the possible steps that could be part of her routine. And then we started eliminating them by asking, would this make you feel calm and relaxed? And if the answer was no, we crossed it off. And first off, right, the calm and relaxed is the specific part that is important to her. Then whether the action is calm and relaxed depends on the person. There are steps that you might think are calm and relaxing that I think are stressful and frustrating, and vice versa. There's something that I like. Here's a great example. Digging into a spreadsheet and looking at numbers, to me, so calm and relaxing. I love a spreadsheet. I love numbers. For some of you, that probably makes you like tense up inside. So we went through every step and crossed off the ones that weren't calm and relaxing. One of the things we crossed off was working out. Does it mean that she doesn't want to work out? No. Did it mean that working out in the morning isn't something that's pretty common that people incorporate into their morning routine? No. But the purpose of her morning routine was calm and relaxing, and for her, working out was not calm and relaxing. So we crossed it off. If we hadn't gotten clear on that beforehand, it is very easy that she could have said that was a step she wanted to include. So I want to make sure that you take the time to get clear on your goals before you start to take action on them, which in fact is the topic that I did week 1 of the year. Like our very first live of the year, that is the topic, was getting clear, defining our goals. So if this is something you still struggle with, if like me talking about this section, you're like, wow, this one particular goal is still kind of vague and I still think I'm picking action steps that aren't actually getting to me to where I want to be, go back and rewatch that video with that goal in mind from week 1. There's timestamps in the description box. You can jump straight to the one that is about to the section that is the topic for the week. And I want you to get really clear on your goals.